Have you ever noticed how a simple prayer before sleep can transform your entire life? What if I told you that one of the most powerful prayers comes from the wisdom of John Paul II, a man who changed millions of lives with his spiritual guidance? Tonight, we'll explore what truly happens when you recite this special prayer before closing your eyes, and why it might be the key to unlocking peace, prosperity, and well-being that you've been searching for. Welcome to our channel, where we explore the timeless wisdom that brings light to our modern challenges. Today, we're diving into a prayer that John Paul II often recommended, and the remarkable effects it has on those who practice it faithfully. Let me tell you about Maria, a 65-year-old grandmother who lived in a small apartment in the city. Every day, Maria would wake up feeling exhausted, worried about her mounting medical bills, and unsure if her retirement savings would last. Sleep became her enemy, those quiet hours where worries seemed to shout the loudest. Her doctor had prescribed sleeping pills, but they left her feeling foggy and disconnected the next day. One afternoon, while visiting her parish, Maria's priest noticed her exhaustion. He shared with her a simple nighttime prayer that John Paul II had often recommended during his papacy. John Paul II believed that how we end our day shapes how we begin the next one, the priest explained. This prayer isn't just about words, it's about surrendering your burdens before sleep. Skeptical but desperate, Maria decided to try it. That night, instead of reaching for her sleeping pill, she sat on the edge of her bed and recited the prayer. The words were simple, but something about the intention behind them touched her heart deeply. We would love to hear where you're watching from. Are you practicing any bedtime prayers already? Share in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more spiritual wisdom that can transform your daily life. Your experiences matter to our community, and we'd be honored if you joined us on this journey. The first night, Maria noticed something subtle but significant. She fell asleep without the usual hour of tossing and turning. By the end of the week, she was sleeping through the night naturally for the first time in years. But what happened next surprised her even more. Without the mental fog from sleeping pills, Maria began thinking more clearly about her finances. She realized she had been making impulse purchases out of anxiety, spending money on things that didn't truly bring her peace. The clarity that came with restful sleep helped her see patterns in her spending that she'd been blind to before. The prayer wasn't changing my bank account, Maria later shared with friends. It was changing my relationship with money and worry. John Paul II often taught that true prosperity comes not from accumulation, but from proper stewardship of what we have. His teachings emphasize that anxiety about tomorrow prevents us from making wise decisions today. Through her new nightly ritual, Maria was experiencing this wisdom firsthand. By the third week, Maria noticed another change. The constant back pain that had plagued her for years seemed less intense in the mornings. Her doctor confirmed what research has long shown, that quality sleep is fundamental to pain management and physical healing. The chronic inflammation that had been worsened by poor sleep was finally getting a chance to subside. But something even more profound was happening in Maria's spirit. Each night, as she surrendered her worries through prayer, she was practicing a muscle of faith that grew stronger with each repetition. The prayer became less about the words themselves and more about the moment of trust it represented. John Paul II understood that physical health, financial stability, and spiritual peace aren't separate realms, but deeply interconnected aspects of our well-being. When we address one area with intention, the others often follow. This holistic understanding was central to his teachings. Maria began to notice how her improved sleep affected her relationships. Without the irritability that comes from exhaustion, she was more patient with her grandchildren. Without the anxiety about finances consuming her thoughts, she could be fully present during family gatherings. The prayer John Paul II recommended wasn't magical. It didn't instantly solve all problems or fill bank accounts overnight. What it did was far more valuable. It created a space of peace where wisdom could emerge. In that quiet moment before sleep, when Maria released her grip on worry, she could finally hear the still small voice of guidance within. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. John Paul II often reflected on these words from Scripture, understanding that peace isn't merely the absence of trouble, but a presence that transforms how we experience life's challenges. For Maria, the transformation continued in unexpected ways. With better sleep came more energy. With more energy, she began taking short walks in the morning. These walks became longer as her strength improved. The endorphins from regular movement further improved her mood and sleep quality, creating a positive cycle of well-being. Her financial decisions continued to improve as well. One evening, after her prayer, Maria had a moment of clarity about a long-forgotten skill she had, knitting beautiful scarves and blankets. What began as a therapeutic hobby soon became a small source of supplemental income when her church friends began requesting items. It wasn't about the money, Maria explained. It was about remembering that I still had gifts to offer the world. The prayer helped me quiet the noise of worry so I could remember what I already knew. John Paul II often taught that each person has unique gifts meant to serve others. Sometimes, anxiety and fear can bury these gifts beneath layers of concern about survival. When those layers are peeled back through prayer and peaceful rest, our natural abilities can resurface. As the weeks turned to months, Maria noticed how this simple nightly ritual had created a ripple effect throughout her entire life. Her medical checkups showed improvements in blood pressure and inflammation markers. Her modest savings were now growing slightly instead of constantly diminishing. And most importantly, a sense of purpose had returned to her days. The prayer before sleep had become a boundary between the concerns of the day and the rest her body and spirit needed. It wasn't that her problems had disappeared. She still had limited resources and health challenges, but her relationship to these challenges had fundamentally shifted. What's remarkable about Maria's story is how it reflects the integrated wisdom John Paul II consistently taught throughout his life. He understood that spiritual practices aren't separate from real-life concerns like health and finances. Rather, they provide the foundation for addressing these concerns with wisdom and perspective. The specific prayer that John Paul II recommended was deceptively simple. It wasn't lengthy or complicated, but rather focused on three key elements: gratitude for the day's blessings, honest acknowledgement of failures, and surrender of all worries to divine care. This structure creates what psychologists now recognize as an ideal mindset for restorative sleep. When we review our day with gratitude, we train our minds to recognize abundance rather than scarcity, taught John Paul II. This perspective shift is profound not just spiritually, but also financially. Financial advisors often note that a scarcity mindset leads to panic-based decisions, while an abundance mindset allows for strategic planning. For Maria, the gratitude portion of her nightly prayer began transforming how she viewed her resources. Instead of focusing on what she lacked, she started acknowledging what she had: a safe place to live, enough food, loving family members. This shift didn't change her bank balance overnight, but it changed something perhaps more important: her sense of security. The second part of the prayer, acknowledging where we've fallen short, creates what John Paul II called a clean slate for tomorrow. Modern sleep research confirms that unresolved guilt and regret significantly disrupt sleep patterns. By addressing these feelings before sleep, we prevent them from cycling through our minds during crucial rest hours. Maria found that Acknowledging her shortcomings, perhaps moments of impatience with her grandchildren or times she'd indulged in worry, actually freed her from obsessing over them during the night. This honest self-assessment, followed by acceptance, created mental space for deeper rest. The final element, surrendering worries to divine care, might seem purely spiritual, but its effects on physical health are well documented. When we consciously release the tension we're holding about future concerns, our nervous system can shift from the fight or flight mode that characterizes anxiety to the rest and digest state necessary for healing and restoration. For Maria, this surrender became physically tangible. She could feel the tension leaving her shoulders and jaw as she spoke the words of release. Her doctor explained that this relaxation response was lowering her cortisol levels, the stress hormone that, when chronically elevated, contributes to inflammation, cardiovascular issues, and immune suppression. Our bodies were designed to experience periodic stress, followed by complete recovery, her doctor explained. But in modern life, many people stay in a state of low-grade stress constantly. Your prayer practice is creating a daily recovery period that your body desperately needs. John Paul II, though not a medical professional, understood this connection intuitively. He frequently taught that peace of mind and heart were not luxury items, but necessities for human flourishing. His own life demonstrated remarkable resilience through tremendous challenges, a resilience fueled by his disciplined prayer life. As Maria continued her nightly prayer ritual, something unexpected happened in her relationship with money. The constant background hum of financial anxiety began to quiet. This didn't mean her financial situation had dramatically changed, but her response to it had. Financial planners often observe that emotional spending, purchasing items to relieve stress or anxiety, can undermine even the most carefully constructed budget. As Maria's general anxiety levels decreased through better sleep and spiritual practice, her impulse purchases naturally diminished. "I realized I had been buying things to feel secure," she told her daughter, "but the prayer was giving me a security that products couldn't provide." With this insight, Maria began redirecting money previously spent on unnecessary items toward building a small emergency fund, something her financial anxiety had paradoxically prevented her from doing before. John Paul II often spoke about the proper relationship with material goods. He didn't demonize money or possessions, but rather encouraged a thoughtful stewardship that recognized their proper place in a well-ordered life. Maria was experiencing the freedom that comes when money becomes a tool, rather than a source of identity or security. The physical benefits continued to unfold as well. The deep, restorative sleep Maria now enjoyed regularly was allowing her body to perform its nightly maintenance and healing functions optimally. Her immune system showed signs of strengthening. She noticed she was catching fewer of the seasonal colds that had previously left her depleted for weeks. Her doctor explained that during deep sleep stages, the body produces cytokines, proteins that help fight inflammation and infection. When you're sleep-deprived, production of these protective substances decreases, he told her. Your consistent sleep improvement is literally strengthening your body's defense systems. John Paul II had often taught that caring for our physical bodies is a form of honoring the divine gift of life. He demonstrated this himself by maintaining physical activity even as his health challenges increased in later years. This integrated understanding that spiritual disciplines support physical health, which in turn supports our ability to serve others, was central to his teachings. As weeks turned to months, Maria found herself sharing her experience with friends at her senior center. Many were struggling with similar challenges: sleep disruption, financial worry, and chronic health issues, forming a troubling cycle that seemed impossible to break. "I'm not saying it's magic," Maria cautioned them. Some nights are still difficult, some worries still feel too big, but something has fundamentally shifted in how I approach each night, and therefore, each day. Several of her friends decided to try the practice themselves. Those who did reported similar gradual improvements. Not miraculous overnight transformations, but steady, positive changes in multiple areas of life. What began as one woman's desperate attempt to find sleep without medication was becoming a quiet movement among her community. Maria's daughter, a busy mother of 3 working a demanding job, noticed the changes in her mother and became curious. "Mum seems different," she told her husband. "More at peace, more present when we visit. And she's not talking about her health problems constantly anymore." When she asked her mother about the change, Maria shared the prayer practice with her. Though skeptical, her daughter was also struggling with sleep, caught in a cycle of late night, worrying about family finances and waking unrested to face demands at work and home. "What do you have to lose?" Maria asked gently. Her daughter decided to try it, adapting the practice to her own faith perspective. Within weeks, she too was experiencing better rest and a greater sense of perspective about her family's financial challenges. The generational transmission of both anxiety and wisdom was unfolding in real time. John Paul II had often spoken about how spiritual practices ripple outward, from individuals to families to communities. Maria was witnessing this ripple effect firsthand as her own transformation began influencing those around her. What's particularly notable about this prayer practice is its accessibility. It requires no special equipment, no financial investment, and very little time. In a world where wellness is often commodified and monetized, this ancient practice offers profound benefits freely available to anyone willing to try it with an open heart. "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication," John Paul II once said, quoting Leonardo da Vinci. This wisdom applies perfectly to the bedtime prayer he advocated. In its simplicity lies its power and accessibility. For Maria, the practice continued to deepen. She found herself naturally extending the gratitude portion, becoming more specific about the day's gifts. Research in positive psychology confirms that this kind of detailed gratitude practice activates regions of the brain associated with dopamine release, essentially training our neural pathways to more readily notice positive aspects of our experience. The financial implications of this rewired perspective continued to unfold. As Maria became more attuned to the resources she already had, she discovered creative ways to meet her needs that didn't require additional spending. The abundance mindset fostered by her prayer practice was translating into practical resource management. Similarly, the health benefits compounded over time. With consistently better sleep, Maria had more energy for gentle exercise. With regular movement, her sleep quality improved further. This virtuous cycle replaced the vicious one that had previously dominated her life. Perhaps most significantly, Maria's relationship with uncertainty began to transform. Aging brings inevitable uncertainties about health, finances, independence, and more. These unknowns had previously been a source of crushing anxiety for Maria, particularly at night when defenses are naturally lower. Through her faithful prayer practice, Maria wasn't eliminating uncertainty from her life. That would be impossible. Rather, she was developing a new relationship with it. The nightly act of surrender was strengthening her uncertainty tolerance muscle, a psychological quality associated with resilience and mental well-being. John Paul II often taught that peace isn't found in perfect certainty or control, but in trust despite uncertainty. "Be not afraid" was one of his most frequent exhortations, not because there's nothing to fear, but because fear need not have the final word. For Maria, this growing peace with uncertainty had tangible effects on her financial decisions. She no longer felt compelled to make panic-based choices out of fear of the future. Instead, she could evaluate options more clearly and choose paths aligned with her actual values rather than her anxieties. 6 months into her nightly prayer practice, Maria experienced what she later described as the week everything tried to fall apart. Her refrigerator stopped working, requiring an unexpected expense. Her arthritis flared painfully during a cold spell, and her daughter temporarily lost childcare, requiring Maria to watch her grandchildren for long hours despite her fatigue. In the past, such a convergence of challenges would have sent Maria into a spiral of anxiety, sleepless nights, and poor decisions. But something different happened this time, something that demonstrated how deeply the prayer practice had transformed her inner landscape. "I noticed that I was still sleeping," she told her priest with wonder in her voice. "Not perfectly, but enough. And my first thoughts weren't catastrophic. Instead of thinking everything is falling apart, I found myself thinking this is a difficult season that will pass." This cognitive shift from catastrophizing to contextualizing reflects what psychologists call stress resilience. It's not that resilient people experience fewer stresses. Rather, they process those stresses differently in ways that protect both mental and physical health. John Paul II, who lived through war, occupation, assassination attempts, and chronic illness, embodied this resilience throughout his life. His teachings frequently emphasize that suffering is not optional in human life, but our response to it shapes its ultimate meaning and impact. For Maria, the financial challenge of the unexpected refrigerator repair tested her newfound equanimity. Before her prayer practice, such an expense would have triggered panic-based financial decisions, perhaps putting the repair on a high-interest credit card or borrowing from her already limited future funds. Instead, she found herself able to pause and consider options more calmly. She remembered her neighbor mentioning a reliable appliance repair person who offered senior discounts and payment plans. The repair ended up costing less than replacement, and the payment arrangement allowed her to manage it without disrupting her careful budget. "The prayer didn't fix my refrigerator or add money to my account," Maria explained to a friend, "but it gave me the clear mind needed to find a better solution than panic would have allowed." This practical wisdom about money matters was something John Paul II addressed throughout his papacy. He recognized that financial decisions are rarely made in isolation from emotional and spiritual states. By cultivating inner peace, we create the conditions for wiser stewardship of whatever resources we have, whether abundant or limited. Maria's arthritis flare-up presented a different kind of challenge. Physical pain has a unique way of dominating consciousness, making it difficult to focus on anything else. In previous flare-ups, Maria had found herself caught in cycles of pain, anxiety about the pain, poor sleep due to both, and then increased pain due to sleep deprivation. This time, while the pain itself wasn't eliminated, her relationship with it shifted. The nightly prayer practice had strengthened her ability to acknowledge suffering without becoming entirely identified with it. "This is pain in my body," she would think, "but it is not all of who I am." Her doctor explained that this cognitive distinction actually affects how pain signals are processed in the brain. When pain is accompanied by fear and catastrophizing, it activates additional neural pathways that amplify suffering, he told her. "Your ability to experience pain without excessive fear response is protecting your nervous system from this amplification effect." John Paul II, particularly in his later years as he dealt with Parkinson's disease and other health challenges, demonstrated this distinction between acknowledging suffering and being defined by it. He continued his work and maintained his characteristic joy even as his physical limitations increased, a living testament to the principles he taught. The third challenge, providing unexpected childcare for her grandchildren, tested Maria's energy reserves and patience. Caring for young children is demanding even with optimal health and resources. Doing so while managing chronic pain and financial concerns could have been overwhelming. Yet Maria found herself drawing on unexpected reserves of strength and creativity. Rather than focusing on her limitations, she considered what unique gifts she could offer her grandchildren during this time. She taught them simple finger knitting, told stories from her childhood, and introduced them to the calm, breathing techniques she had learned as part of her bedtime routine. "Grandma, you're different from before," her 7-year-old grandson observed one afternoon. "You used to worry all the time and tell us to be careful about everything. Now you're more fun." From the mouths of babes, Maria received confirmation of her transformation. The prayer wasn't just changing her sleep or her private emotional state. It was changing how she showed up in her most important relationships. John Paul II often taught that authentic spirituality should bear fruit in our interactions with others. If our practices increase our judgment, isolation, or rigidity, something has gone awry. Conversely, if they foster patience, presence, and compassionate engagement, we can trust we're on the right path. As Maria continued to share her experience with friends, an interesting pattern emerged. Those who approached the prayer as a mechanical formula or a magical guarantee generally reported minimal benefits and quickly abandoned the practice. Those who engaged it as a genuine relationship and conversation reported experiences similar to Maria's, gradual but substantial positive changes across multiple life dimensions. "It's not about saying the exact right words," Maria explained to a friend who was getting frustrated with the practice. "It's about creating a nightly space of honest conversation where you can set down your burdens before sleep." John Paul II had emphasized this distinction throughout his teachings on prayer. Spiritual practices are not transactions where we perform certain actions to get desired outcomes. Rather, they are invitations into relationship. A relationship that gradually transforms us from within. For Maria, one of the most profound transformations occurred in her sense of purpose. Before beginning her prayer practice, she had viewed her senior years primarily through the lens of survival and limitation. Her declining health and fixed income seemed to narrow her possibilities for meaningful contribution. As the months of restored sleep, decreased anxiety, and greater financial stability accumulated, Maria began sensing new purpose stirring within her. The knitting projects that had begun as therapy became a source of both supplemental income and community connection. Younger women at her church asked her to teach them, creating intergenerational bonds that enriched everyone involved. "I never imagined that at 71 I would be starting something new," Maria shared with her prayer group. "I thought those days were behind me." John Paul II had often emphasized that every stage of life has its unique purpose and contribution. Even as physical abilities may decline with age, wisdom, perspective, and spiritual depth can continue growing until our final breath. Maria was embodying this teaching, discovering new expressions of purpose adapted to her current circumstances. The financial dimension of this renewed purpose was unexpected but significant. The modest income from selling her knitted items and occasionally teaching small classes didn't make her wealthy, but it provided an important psychological benefit, the sense that she could still generate resources rather than only consuming them. Financial gerontologists have identified this shift from producer to consumer as one of the most challenging psychological transitions of retirement. Maria was finding a balanced middle path, one that honored her limitations while still allowing her to experience the dignity of contribution. Her doctor noted another interesting development during a regular checkup. "Your overall inflammation markers are significantly lower than 6 months ago," he told her. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." The connection between chronic stress, Inflammation and disease is well established in medical research. By addressing the root causes of her stress through spiritual practice, improved sleep, and a more balanced perspective on finances, Maria was creating conditions for her body's natural healing processes to function more effectively. John Paul II had often spoken about the integration of spiritual and physical health, asserting that humans are not disembodied souls, but integrated beings whose physical and spiritual dimensions constantly interact. Modern medical research increasingly confirms this integrated understanding. As Maria approached the one-year anniversary of beginning her nightly prayer practice, she decided to journal about the changes she had experienced. Looking back at her notes from those early, difficult days provided a striking contrast to her current reality. 1 year ago, I was taking sleeping pills that left me groggy, spending money I didn't have on things I didn't need to feel better momentarily, and visiting the doctor constantly with various stress-related ailments, she wrote. Today, I sleep. Naturally, most nights have a small emergency fund for the first time in decades and have reduced 3 of my medications with my doctor's approval. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. There had been no dramatic moment of instantaneous change. Rather, small, faithful actions had accumulated, gradually reshaping her inner landscape and therefore her outer reality. John Paul II had often used the metaphor of a garden to describe spiritual growth. Dramatic conversions certainly happen, but more commonly, transformation occurs through faithful tending, planting seeds, watering regularly, pulling weeds, and patiently waiting for growth to emerge in its proper season. For Maria, this gardening metaphor extended to her financial life as well. Her emergency fund had grown penny by penny, dollar by dollar, not through dramatic windfalls, but through small, consistent actions made possible by her clearer mind and reduced anxiety. Similarly, her health improvements had come gradually as one good night's sleep built upon another, as slightly better choices accumulated day by day, and as her nervous system slowly recalibrated to a lower baseline of stress. The prayer didn't change my circumstances magically, Maria reflected. I still have arthritis, I'm still on a fixed income, I still worry sometimes. But the prayer changed my relationship to these realities, and that has made all the difference. John Paul II had taught that peace is not the absence of problems, but the presence of something greater that puts problems in their proper perspective. Maria was living this truth, finding that as her spiritual center strengthened, external challenges lost some of their power to define her experience. The ripple effects continued to spread outward. Maria's daughter, initially skeptical but eventually convinced by the visible changes in her mother, had adopted a version of the practice herself. After several months, she reported better sleep, improved focus at work, and a more patient presence with her children. "Mom, I think you've started a family tradition," she told Maria one evening. "I've been teaching the kids a simple version before their bedtime, and they're falling asleep more easily." The intergenerational transmission of wisdom was unfolding naturally, not through forced instruction, but through lived example. John Paul II had often emphasized the critical role of grandparents in passing on spiritual heritage, noting that they often have a unique capacity to influence younger generations through their lived witness. At her senior center, Maria had become something of an unofficial resource person. "Talk to Maria about that sleep issue," people would say. Or Maria might have some ideas about managing those medical expenses. Without seeking the role, she had become a wisdom bearer in her community. Financial advisors often note that one of the best ways to improve one's financial situation is to be in community with those making wise choices. Similarly, health researchers have documented the contagious nature of health behaviors in social networks. Maria's transformation was creating gentle, positive pressure in her community, inviting others towards similar growth. "I never set out to influence anyone, she told her priest. I was just desperate for sleep without chemicals. All of this, the financial changes, the health improvements, the community role, has been unexpected fruit. John Paul II often taught that authentic spiritual transformation is never solely for the individual. When we are genuinely changed from within, that change naturally affects our relationships, communities, and world. The private act of prayer before sleep had catalyzed a quiet movement of renewal in Maria's corner of the world. A researcher studying longevity in seniors might view Maria's story through the lens of measurable health markers: improved sleep quality, reduced inflammation, lower stress hormones. A financial advisor might focus on her more balanced approach to resources: reduced impulse spending, creation of emergency savings, supplemental income stream. But Maria herself understood her transformation more holistically. The prayer had created space for her to remember who she truly was beneath her worries and limitations. That remembering had allowed her natural wisdom about health, finances, and relationships to resurface and find expression appropriate to her current season of life. What began as a desperate attempt to find sleep without medication had become a rediscovery of purpose, agency, and joy. The simple act of faithful prayer before sleep had initiated a cascade of positive changes that no single intervention, not a medication, not a financial windfall, not a miraculous cure, could have accomplished alone. John Paul II, with his integrated understanding of human flourishing, would likely recognize in Maria's story the very principles he taught throughout his papacy. That authentic spirituality heals and integrates all dimensions of human experience. That small, faithful actions accumulate into significant transformation, and that inner peace creates the conditions for wisdom in every area of life. For those watching who struggle with similar challenges: disrupted sleep, financial anxiety, health concerns, Maria's journey offers both hope and a practical starting point. The prayer that transformed her life remains freely available to all, requiring no special credentials, equipment, or resources, only the willingness to create a nightly space of honesty, gratitude, and surrender. As we conclude this exploration of John Paul II's wisdom on nighttime prayer, we invite you to try this practice yourself, not as a magical formula, but as an invitation into a relationship that might gradually transform your experience from within. What might change in your life if you ended each day by consciously releasing its burdens? How might your relationship with money, health, and purpose shift if worry no longer dominated your nights? The answers to these questions await your discovery, one peaceful night at a time. If you've found value in today's reflection, we invite you to share it with someone who might be struggling with sleep, anxiety, or a sense of purpose. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer others is a practice that has transformed our own lives. Until next time, may your nights be peaceful, your days purposeful, and your journey blessed with the wisdom that comes from authentic connection with the divine presence that holds all things. Please share in the comments below how prayer has impacted your life, health, or finances. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you're new to our channel, we invite you to subscribe and join our community of seekers committed to living with purpose, peace, and practical wisdom. Remember Maria's insight: transformation rarely happens overnight, but faithful small actions create the conditions for profound change over time. Your journey of integration, where spiritual wisdom meets practical living, begins with a single honest prayer tonight.